Dude, that's a
And
nice
we're
countdown.
live.
That's a nice countdown.
That's a nice countdown. It definitely helps set the tone for the conversation and for the mindset. All right, so first things first. This is the first podcast we're launching, and I'm excited to be doing this with somebody special. We've obviously been friends for a very long time. We go way, 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 way back, and I'm excited to dive into a whole lot of topics. And we're just going to keep it more conversational, cover an entire area of business and personal development topics that I want to cover that I have in mind, and then we'll just flow with the conversation. But before we get into it, how about you give everybody an introduction to yourself and let everybody know who you are?
Sure. I mean, I appreciate you for having me on, of course. That's the first thing that should be said. I love having these conversations, regardless of whether it's on a podcast or not, just in person, whenever we talk. We're
Hmm.
always kind of bouncing off of each other and learning, whether it's about business or whether it's about life. Yeah, so in terms of introduction, I'll keep it short. Moe Abbassi. I'm a mindset and performance coach to entrepreneurs, executives, businessmen, and I help them just not only perform better in their day to day life, but make sure that their mind, their emotions, their thoughts is serving them. I had two businesses before this that did pretty well, and I found myself extremely burnt out and in a place where I was just unhappy and confused. And you even remember these times, bro. You used to come over and I used to be like, I don't know what I want to do. And I sometimes would have these big visions of making millions. And then sometimes I would be confused. And yeah, I went on a long journey to kind of figure it out. And I teach people how to basically figure their stuff out now. So
Yeah,
that's
that's
that.
awesome. A whole lot of experiences for sure. And I already have so many questions. It's funny. Before this, we were talking and trying to think about what direction we want to take the conversation. All we have to do is start talking because as soon as you said a couple of things that you just said, I already have 10 questions in mind to ask you. But yeah, I mean, in terms of having you on and being the first guest, it's definitely my pleasure. And I wouldn't have had it any other way. And like I was just saying, I plan on having you on multiple times, and this is going to be a regular thing. We'll talk about all things business. And I think as I grow, as you grow, we're always going to have so many interesting, just perspectives on life and the classic saying of, no one man crosses the same river twice because the man's
Mm.
not the same and the river's not the same. I feel like as time goes on, we just grow so much that we're just going to be evolving and just have fresh perspectives to share. But I want to start from just how we met and how we knew each other. It's funny because I met you from afar. I didn't really meet you, but I knew you from afar when I had just moved to Canada. I'm like 9 or 10 years old. I spoke zero English, right? So English is my third language for those of you who don't know. Spoke zero English, did not know the culture, did not fit in at all. And the whole culture was just weird to me. And then I see you and I'm like, oh, I can kind of like relate to this guy. It looks like he's from the same background. I could see myself as a friend with this guy, but completely different mindset at the time. And you hung around with some people that I didn't necessarily like, so we never really connected. But then years later, we ended up in the same area, same neighborhood, same school, and everything, and just took off from there. So I feel like it's interesting how we met. I don't know if you have any memories of way back, like grade 4, grade 5.
It's crazy, man. Like, it's funny too. We went completely different life paths too. Like our families went different life paths. They went to different places. You went to a different elementary school. Like it's just so interesting how everything kind of aligned back as if it was meant to happen. And I think about all my relationships too with everybody. I'm like every single thing was like designed. It's like meticulously designed. It's like either it was there for a lesson or either it was there um and it seems like a coincidence, but it's not. But no, I don't remember much from when I was a kid, of course, but definitely the over time as we built a relationship, just kind of having that alignment of values and wanting to start a business and wanting to get into entrepreneurship, that was like immediately there.
Yeah, 100%. And I want to ask you so many business questions, and we're going to have all those conversations. But just before that, it's just really interesting to me to continue the same thread of conversation because, if it piques my interest, I want to explore it. So we'll get to business as well. But what you just said about things feeling like sometimes it's fate or it's just destined to be, or how crazy it is, things come full circle. I've had a lot of that happen too. Just our friendship is one of them. But I've seen so much of that, and I feel like this is something that evolves with you as you evolve. I have my own journey with religion and spirituality, and it's gone through completely different directions as I've grown. And I know you have as well. But at this stage in your life, what do you think of all that? What do you think of some idea of fate, of destiny, of how things happen? What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, and I think we had a similar journey for this as well. And I like to bring this back because I feel like we came from a religious place, like our countries, but then over time we became atheist and super logical. And as time goes by, I'm starting to see the value in spirituality and kind of, I wouldn't say I'm religious, but I'm starting to believe that things are supposed to work out the way they are, like they're designed. Because again, like I mentioned, every negative, quote unquote, negative thing that has happened to me in the past, where I'm like, in that moment, I said, I wish this wasn't happening. This is horrible. I don't want this. I look back on now and I'm like, that was actually necessary. Maybe that's how we um, rationalize it. Maybe it's just internal rationalization.
Mhm.
But there's a part of me where I'm like, that was necessary for my growth. I needed that to learn something, experience something. And so now I'm at a place in my life where if anything is happening where it's not ideal, instead of resisting it and not being one with it, I go, oh, it's going to work out. The dots are going to connect. It's like, if it's not working out now, there's a reason for it. There's a lesson here that I haven't extracted. There's an experience I haven't extracted. There's something that's going to happen for me for the future instead of this being something that's happening to me in the moment. So, and I love the Steve Jobs quote. It's like, you can't connect the dots looking backward. You can only connect them looking forward. And
Mhm.
so, or the other way around.
The other
I'm
way around. Yeah, I was
paraphrasing.
just gonna
Yeah.
say that's an
You,
interesting philosophy if that's what he said.
yeah. You can't connect them looking
Forward,
forward. You can only
you can
connect
only
them
connect
looking
them looking
backward.
backwards. Yeah.
And I'm at that point where I see that, and of course, I see the value in religion as well as a, giving up your own ego and personal power of thinking that you know everything to something that's greater. It's like, no, there's a power outside of me, and it knows better than me, and it genuinely does take pressure off of yourself, off of your identity, off of your own ego.
Yeah, and that's the interesting part, right? I feel like anybody that I know who is religious, and anybody who I see from afar who is very clearly religious and very in tune with their belief systems, they tend to just do better. They tend to operate better. They tend to have a more structured, more disciplined lifestyle as a result. So even if the actual substance of their beliefs were not true, let's just say as an example, theoretically speaking, it still has the effect and the result they're looking for. Like as a byproduct, they're still living a more structured, more disciplined, more rigorous life, and they give up, like you said, the ultimate kind of power to a higher being, and that removes so much stress, so much tension from their day to day lives. From goals that they pursue. We see this in athletes, we see this in all kinds of individuals, and there has to be something to be said for that, right? Whether it's true or not, whether the specific book or religious ideology they follow is true or not, it's there has to be something set for that type of lifestyle. I think as we grow older, that's what we're also gravitating more towards. It's the structure in life, it's the moral scaffolding that it gives you, it's having more family values, more traditional values. I think both of us are resonating with that, especially in today's world. So I feel like there's definitely something to be said for that, whether the actual substance is true or not.
100%. Yeah, I agree. And as I'm reading more religious text, I'm starting to see like all of the deep wisdom in it. It's similar to someone who follows, like, let's say, Stoicism. It's like you're reading old text of people who've been there before you, who didn't have access to what's going on in the world right now that made them successful. And it's saying things that does build discipline. Like even within religion, you have the seven deadly sins,
Hmm.
right? Don't go towards lust, where it is natural for a human being to want to go towards lust. Don't go towards it. Don't go towards greed. Don't go towards pride. Don't go towards all of these things, envy, gluttony, that is kind of what makes us quote unquote feel good in the moment, but there's something there that's telling us don't do these things because it's not going to make you feel good long term. And so 100% as I grow older, I'm seeing the value not only in religion, but also just believing in a higher power, because it does make things easier and it takes the pressure off of you to have to perform. And you put it in the higher power and you say, this is my mission, this is my purpose that's been kind of given to me. And every single person that I talk to who's successful, for the large part of the majority, 70%, 80%, in one way or another, they're religious. And it
Mhm.
allows them to have a certain power. Like one of my friends does close to $1 million a month, and him doing work is not him doing work. It's God doing work. It's like God wants me to do this work. So he gives up his power over to a higher power and it allows him to do work. When he
Mhm.
finds himself being prideful or envious or doing things that are lustful or gluttony, he prays away from them and then he gets away from them. It's like brings conscious will to the things that you're not supposed to do. So, yeah, as I grow older, I'm definitely going more towards it, regardless of whether it's quote unquote real or not. As long as it's real in your own head, it's going to serve a purpose.
Yeah, it's definitely a powerful frame of mind, regardless, to operate with that
Yeah.
frame of mind and to just look at it as, I'm not doing work, it's God's work through me, or I have this much of a purpose on this planet and in this life. I think it's a huge frame of mind to operate from. But that brings us to kind of us growing up and going to different paths. And it's interesting again how we basically went full circle towards, entrepreneurship, business, and we didn't really coordinate. I went the sales route. I worked in the sales industry, a lot of different industries, and slowly got into some partnerships and then ventured out on my own. And you went directly into business for yourself and the online space. And we took pretty much different paths, but then we converged pretty much like full circle and came back around. So this kind of leads me back to the question of destiny or fate or any of that type of stuff that you think about. What do you think is more powerful? I would like to know from your perspective, nature or nurture. Do you think we're just wired and we're born with all these ingredients that make up who we become eventually and we can't get away from it? Or do you think it's mostly nurture? Do you think the fact that our paths were so aligned and similar was a result of similar upbringing?
That's a good question. My opinion on this is that it's both,
Mm-hmm.
because yes, my background and upbringing definitely influenced it, right? Seeing it's funny because I feel like we're the same. Like our parents wanted us to go to school, and a lot of people's parents want them to go to the traditional route because it's safer. But then I saw my dad being an entrepreneur and like making his own way, quote unquote. Um, so nurture wise, I was seeing someone who was being self sustainable and wanted to create their own path, and so of course that influences you. But also with nature, the way I think, the way I operate, the things that are genetic to me also helps me. Like you have someone who, no matter how much entrepreneurship or business that you teach them or put them in the environment, if they don't have the mental capabilities to do it in terms of their nature, they're not going to be able to do it. So I think both things have to align, with nature and with nurture. And like we always talk about this too, it's like you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. So if it was just nature, that wouldn't matter. You
Mm-hmm.
could spend
Right.
time with bums and still make it. But that's not
Right.
true, because you do have to spend time with people who bring you up. But then there's also people who spend time around millionaires who do nothing with their life.
Mm-hmm.
And that could be because of their nature. That could be because of just who they are and them being comfortable. And I was talking to my friend about this. I'm like, sometimes you see someone who's like in a bar smoking a cigarette. You could tell they're not really doing much with their life, but they're happy. like
Mm-hmm.
like it
Right.
would be easier to be that person. Just you're happy with your beer and you're just having a cigarette and you're just enjoying life, and that's what brings you happiness. And I think
Mm-hmm.
there's a mixture of both there. That they're probably just wired towards that where they don't need as much. And so that comes down to the nature argument, but also you have the nurture of like your environment, how you grew up, all of these things affect your brain and what you're wired most likely to do. Same thing
Yeah.
with like genetics, right? Like you may be prone to cancer. That's the nature. But also the nurture is what you eat on a daily basis and what you do.
Mhm.
Oftentimes genetics, people who study genetics talk about like your genetics is the gun, but what you do is the bullets that load the gun.
Right.
And so same thing here. It's like for those who are wired to be an entrepreneur and so on and so forth, like you may be wired that way, but also the nurture, how you grew up, who you're around, all of these things, that's the bullets to the gun.
Right. Yeah, I definitely agree. I just wanted to hear your thoughts, but I think I'm on the same page. I feel like the jury's still out on that. I don't think anybody can say with, definite certainty, oh, it's fully nature or it's fully nurture. I just don't think that's a thing. I think it's definitely a combination of both. And when it comes to nature, it's not like there's a genetic code that's written that says entrepreneur and
Yeah.
you just, pop out and you're an entrepreneur. It may be certain, differences that make you, more able to take risk or a higher ability to sustain stress or things of that nature. And then of course there's nurture, where for example we come from, we're both bilingual, multilingual. That definitely has something to do with your ability to communicate. I always said, in sales I had an unfair advantage because I spoke multiple different languages, meaning I could also think in multiple different
Mm,
languages. And people that only speak one language won't understand this. So I would highly suggest everybody goes and learns a different language. And I'm always in the pursuit of learning different languages. I've been working on Greek for a while. That would be my fourth language. I've been recently working on Arabic, and I was just traveling to Morocco, and I was practicing a lot of Arabic there, and actually writing it down in my notes and compiling a whole section just for Arabic. And that would be the fifth language. And the more languages I learn, and the more I kind of pursue that path of learning different languages and communicating in different ways, I can just tell more doors are opening in my mind. So
mm,
right now, if I think in Kurdish in my head, I almost have a completely different identity. It's completely
yeah.
different how you structure sentences, how you speak, what frame of mind you come from. We've talked about this before. I know for sure. I know you'll remember this. When we think in our heads in Farsi, you come from a completely different perspective. And we've talked about the Farsi language in general. It's a lot more poetic. Things are way more indirect. You say something simple, but it takes a long time to say it, as opposed to English, where you're just direct and blunt. And when we think in English, we have completely different identities, and it's the same thing. So I feel like that is nurture. It's where we come from. It's, by chance we're born somewhere else in the cultures we grow up in, but it has a huge influence on how we think, how we operate, obviously what we're exposed to in our environments, but also the linguistic abilities and the communication skills and how that translates into sales and into business and entrepreneurship. So I'm almost on the side of nurture plays a stronger role, and environment plays a stronger role, and culture and upbringing and all these things. But then there are also tendencies where I feel like genetics play a big role as well. But if I was to think back to my drive and the fire that I feel burning inside me, I get this question asked when I go on podcasts, and people say, what motivates you or what drives you? And the thing that I always go back to is how I grew up. It's growing up without my dad being there, meeting him for the first time when I'm 10 years old, and just being in that environment where it's just you have to either crumble or you have to become a man very
Mm,
quickly. And I feel like that left such a huge impact. I don't want to say a hole, because in a lot of ways there's so much value in it, but it just left such a huge imprint on me that it's a lifelong imprint. And I genuinely feel like I have a lifelong fire just burning. I don't think there's anything that could put it out. Right. So I feel like I might think to myself, well, I've always been driven, must be genetics. But if I think back to early life, there are a lot of conditions that would cause me to become a more driven person. So I think I lean more on nurture, but definitely a bit of both. But I know you wanted to comment on the language and the way you think in different languages. I know we've talked about that before.
yeah, that is an interesting point because, um, dude, you even see it in how people move, like their bodies, how they communicate with their bodies is completely different based off of the language that they speak, and
Yeah, that's true.
how you communicate with your body also affects how you think and how you feel, right?
Hmm.
So, and I don't want to come across off wrong here, but like sometimes you'll see someone walking and you don't even have to look at them. You can see them from behind and be like, they probably come from this culture or they probably come from this country or background
Hmm.
because of just their mannerisms. And Yeah, there's a lot that goes into it. Your language, how you walk, how you speak, all of these things when it comes to nurture affect you. But at the same token, I would also say like nurture was what able or enabled you to be able to do what you do now. But if you had like a mental disability, which is nature, you wouldn't be able to do anything.
Right. Good point. Yeah.
Like that's the base. It's not gonna nature in itself is not gonna allow you to become an entrepreneur or be successful on its own, but the base has to be there. It's like your ability has to be there, and then nurture is what takes your ability to the next level. Um, so which one is
Yeah, you're
more
right.
important? I
Yeah.
don't know. I don't know. I
I
think
think health in general is such an interesting topic because on one hand, yeah, you have the genetics and you have the nature. On the other hand, like we said, nurture. They usually say about 70% is lifestyle habits, eating habits, diet, exercise, all these things. They always say some of the most notable people in the health and wellness space, in the scientific space, people like Peter Attia, David Sinclair, all these guys too, Huberman. They always say, exercise is the number one medicine for pretty
mm,
much everything, right? Just exercise more and it gets rid of so many underlying issues that we have. This sedentary lifestyle we have over here, especially in more modern countries. And when I travel, I see this as such a prime example. Versus a more active lifestyle makes a big difference. So health is definitely, and then you have the genetic components where obviously if you're, we're fortunate enough to be healthy and mentally and physically healthy. So always grateful for that. That's just reason in itself to never complain and never become ungrateful. That in itself is the only reason we need, realistically. So I'm definitely with you there. But I feel like this just reminded me of, every time your health is at risk, or even if you're sick, you have a cold or something, you start to think, all your values change, your goals change, your perception of, success changes. And it's so interesting. And this brings me to a question I want to ask you about how you define success and how you define your own values. And obviously, the classic quote is, I'm going to paraphrase, but something along the lines of, if you ask a healthy man what he wants, he'll name 1,000 things. If you ask a sick man what he wants, he'll
mm,
only name one thing, which is your health,
mm.
right? So, in this frame of conversation, how do you define success, or how do you look at success, or what's important to you, or what does a good life look like to you?
Um, I think values are important. Making sure that you're living a life but by values. And this could be my own value, which is what defines success. But I think generally for most people, especially men, what defines success is going to be progress. Like, I've always come back to this. It's like anytime I'm not making progress in some form or another, my values just go out the window. Like if I don't have progress in front of me, all of my values one by one, the things that I find is important, I stop caring about those as well. And so I think that as long as you're, and I think you sent a quote to me too a while back. It was like from the Bible or something, or it was from a book someone wrote about the Bible on progress
Mm-hmm.
and how
Yeah, yeah,
perfection is progress.
yeah. That was a really good quote. I'll try to find that as you're discussing this.
That quote beautifully defined what it means to be successful and what it means to also lead a life of fulfillment, lead a life of happiness, lead a life where you are not suffering and you're also helping the world and contributing. Like everything that is positive, in my opinion, comes from progress and having something to progress towards. Now, whether it's meaningful or not, uh, who knows what is actually meaningful, right? Like at the end of the day, we're all going to die. The sun is going to blow up at some point. The world is not going to exist, so on and so forth. So meaning is all in the eye of the beholder. But as long as it's meaningful to you, that you find meaning in and you're progressing in it, I think that's what's going to bring success in all areas of life. I am the most healthiest, happiest, relationships going well, friendships going well, family going well, business going well when I'm making progress.
Mm-hmm.
And that could be progress in anything, by the way. When I'm making progress, it's got a chain effect where everything is affected by it. If I'm making progress in health, I feel good, my business goes good, my relationship goes good. If I'm making progress in my relationship, the other things go. So they're all connected off of the one thing, which is progress. Because normally, to this answer of success, I would say, well, figure out your values, and then you'll figure out success. But you could know your values, and if you're only maintaining those values, I think they'll fall apart over time. So
Hmm.
my
And to your
answer has
point,
changed.
there's been, and I feel like you've seen this too. You must have come across this, or we might have even talked about it before. But there's been actual research done by different labs and articles published on this, where we have, I think it's either dopamine or serotonin or both, that's released when we make progress versus when we achieve the goal. So
Mm,
it's literally been shown and documented that there's a lot more feel good chemicals released and almost more celebratory feelings internally when you're making progress towards a goal as opposed to actually reaching the goal, actually accomplishing the goal. And I have this exact experience myself, and I feel like you have something to say on this too. Every time in my career, I've set a goal, whether it's been a financial goal. I remember one so clearly, it was to make 20K a month. And when I was young, 16, 17, 19, that was the big goal. And I was always writing it down. And I would think to myself, when I hit this, I've made it, right?
mm,
And then I remember hitting that goal, and I remember it pretty much felt like nothing, right? And then hitting double that goal and triple and way more, and continuing that progress. And the goal itself, the accomplishment itself, was almost empty, right? It didn't feel like
yeah.
anything. If anything, I almost get down on myself when I accomplish goals, because it almost feels like this peak has been reached, this peak has been climbed. I gotta go all the way back down now and find the new peak and climb that peak. So it's almost like starting from ground zero again. And I always get the feeling too that, I could have done this a long time ago if I only had the belief, or if I had moved faster, or if I zigged when I should have zagged, or all these different things that come up. Again, hindsight is 2020. Like Steve Jobs said, I would have accomplished this a lot sooner. I could have done this sooner. So it's almost never a good feeling in a way where I'm accomplishing my goals. It's always on to the next. And I channel that in the right way. My personal belief is always grateful, never satisfied. And it's not about monetary satisfaction or possessions. It's about never being satisfied with your own growth and development. There's always another stage. There's always another layer. Learning is a lifelong journey. So that's the way that I look at it. But I just wanted to say it's been quite literally shown that we feel better in progress than we do in achievement.
I agree. Yeah, the goal is progress, not the actual goal itself.
It's a
I
good way to
think
look at it.
it's like, yeah, I felt the same way, man. Like you achieve a goal, and then you're like, why does this shit feel so empty? Because you were hoping that the goal was gonna all of a sudden make you feel that same feeling forever that you feel from progress. But it won't, because the goal in itself is nothing. It's like it's meaningless if there is no constant progress. So now what the way I look at it is like, I don't really care about getting to the goal. I have an intention. Of course, I want to get to that intention, but as long as I'm making progress towards that intention, that's all that matters to me. Because that's when I'm the happiest. Like that's when I
Mhm.
feel the best. And we were literally texting about this last night, talking about the Tyson Fury show or reality TV documentary, whatever
I
you
actually
want,
just wanted to bring that up because it's such a prime example of this.
like the mini series, right? And
Yeah.
it shows like and it's interesting too. I think when you have, and I don't want to say man and woman, because there's women who need constant progress. And I think it comes down to masculine and feminine. The masculine energy, so you can be a woman and still have that masculine energy, but I think the masculine energy needs constant improvement and progress to feel happy. And you saw that in the documentary, in the film. Like when he's at home just doing basic shit, like just taking the trash out and just hanging around and doing nothing, boom, depression, emotions all over the face, feeling like crap. The moment he was like, oh, I got another fight to prepare for, and I got to go to
Mhm.
camp, and I got to
Mhm.
go to war basically with myself and someone else, literally, he feels good. He feels happy, because the masculine needs something to work towards all the time. And it doesn't always have to be monetary goals, right? Like you could get to your monetary goal and then say, you know what? I feel good with this monetary goal. I'm going to maintain this. Now I got another goal. I want to get to a health goal, or I
Mhm.
want to get to an experience goal, or I want to get to a networking goal. Like there's so many different goals that you could achieve, so many intentions that you could achieve, but you need that progress because again, my values are different, right? My first value is health. Like that's what I value the most. My second value is courageousness, doing something that scares me. But my values don't matter if there's no progress. If I'm just maintaining those values over time, um, they're gonna die. Like there's no such thing
Mhm.
as maintenance. It's gonna either go lower or it's gonna go higher. And so we need to constantly that masculine needs that constant search. And this is
Mhm.
why societies have been built in the first place. This is why empires have been built, like Roman Empire, Persian Empire. All of these people were just like, okay, we got to the goal of getting this area, but let's keep moving because that's it's
Mhm.
just fun to keep doing it. Like that's the whole point of life is to just keep playing. And I think going back to the religion aspect, I think God wants you to keep playing. He put you on this earth to play, and the moment you stop and you go, I'm good, I've reached the goal, you're not living in life anymore. The whole point of life is to continue to play, to keep moving. I remember I went to a seminar and the guy said, I want my tombstone to say life spent. And I think
Mhm.
this is what it truly means to be successful is like you're actually spending your life. You're never in purgatory or stagnation.
Yeah, well, I've been revisiting Seneca's moral essay. It's just slipped my mind right now, but I've read it and listened to the audiobook multiple times over. And just yesterday, I was just in the right state of mind to listen to it. It felt, sometimes books just call you, or something just calls to you. And
Mm.
again, for somebody who claims not to be very spiritual, I take that stuff very seriously. So if I feel something's calling me, I'm like, this must be some type of sign, or maybe I need this. Maybe it's not God or something. Maybe my subconscious mind knows better, or this is
Yeah.
something I'm clearly craving. So I actually went and listened to it in the morning twice from beginning to end. And then I had a couple of calls. I had the client call that I do every week, so I had to go through that. And then afterwards, I put it on again, and I actually went to the MMA gym and I did some Muay Thai and all that. Afterwards, came back, listened to it again on the drive. So I just had it on repeat pretty much. It's on audiobook. It's pretty quick to go through. By the way, I just remembered the name, On the Shortness of Life. So
Mm.
it's a
Yeah.
moral essay by Seneca the Younger, Seneca the philosopher. For anybody who doesn't know, I recommend this one all the time. The number one that I think you would agree I recommend is Meditations by Marcus Aurelius.
I
When it
actually
comes
haven't
to
read Meditations. I haven't
Oh wow,
Yeah, I
okay,
haven't read Meditations. I have
that's
it. I need to read it.
not only do you need to read it, if this is a very deliberate sign right here, go pick that up right after this and read it. You don't need a sign. I'm telling you verbally, you got to read it. I've gone through Meditations. I don't know how many times. That's basically like my, you could say, I don't want to use the word Bible, but that's my go-to book that I
Mm.
revisit over and over and over and over again. And I will probably forever, because when you think about the emperor of the free world, basically at that time, the Roman emperor, right? And he's somebody who wasn't born into it. His whole life story is very interesting. He's one of the most interesting emperors just by how he conducted himself. I think as soon as they made him emperor, he made his, I want to say stepbrother. I'm not too sure. I might be missing some details, but stepbrother or somebody along those lines, he made him co-emperor.
Mm.
And he just did things that were very
Like a business.
unorthodox. Yeah, pretty much. He did things that were very unorthodox, and he used to write these journals to himself, and it was never meant to be published. I think this is the part that intrigues me the most, and why it makes it so valuable. Not only
Mm.
that this is a man's writing who was extremely powerful, running the world, basically the largest army in the world at that time, a couple thousand years ago, and just a glimpse into that mind is interesting. But the fact that he wasn't writing a book like a lot of these philosophers were writing, right? The books that we read that are meant to be written to an audience. There's definitely a tone that changes when it's meant to be written to an audience, and they know this is meant for later reading. But in this case, he's writing it to himself and is not initially meant to be published. And it's all just notes to self. and it's so interesting, and there's so much value in it. And the one that I remember when I first read it really resonated with me was about waking up early in the morning. And
Mm,
I was struggling with this at the time because I've always believed in being an early riser, but going back to nature, I've always been a night owl. I mean, I even did my genetic testing. I've done all that stuff. I've done a whole lot of tests when it comes to actual scientific testing. And one of the genetic testings that I did, I don't know how accurate this would be, but it said on there you're more likely to be prone to be a night owl. So it tells you based on all these different factors. And everything else was fairly accurate. So I would assume that's accurate as well. And my life experience tells me the same. But I've always tried to fight that nature. And that in itself, I think, says a lot. But I've tried to fight that nature. And it's been the most difficult thing to do to basically change my habits to become a person who wakes up at 4 a.m., 5 a.m., right? And when I read Meditations, he says something to himself where he's getting comfortable, and he says, if the birds and the bees get up every day and they fulfill their duties, who says that you can lay here in silk sheets and not also get up and fulfill your duty? So basically,
mm,
get up and go do your duty like all these other animals do and whatnot. So it's really interesting. And there's a lot more in there. There's so much value. Um, in that book, he starts it off by thanking a lot of his mentors and the people that paved the way for him. So that's interesting just to see the lineage of mentorship. And also on that same point, recently when I was going through Seneca's book, and I bought a few books, I just saw them at this store, and I decided to just pick them up. I bought the Iliad, the Odyssey, all these ones by Homer, and also one on Socrates. And then I was reading that, and then I started reading about Plato and then Aristotle, and just the lineage of mentorship that continued to pass on. Aristotle was the teacher to Alexander the Great
mm.
and taught him and all that. So just thinking about how interesting it is, how intertwined it is, and just the value of mentorship. But yeah, going back to the conversation that we are having around time and everything else, I was revisiting on the shortness of life. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that book too. And yesterday, it was just so top of mind. And the more I listened to it, the more, as always, I was picking things up that I feel like I didn't hear before. It felt like it's new in the book, even though I've gone through that book so many times. And just different things were grabbing my attention. And the whole idea around, we don't have a short life is not short. Life is very long if it's invested wisely. And he talks about how all these people, wasted in luxuries and in, all these things that they do just to eventually be able to enjoy their lives and have leisure. But it's just, we're so stingy with our money but so lavish with our time, when it should be the other way around. So many interesting ideas from that, and it's been more recently resonating with me even more. But what's your biggest takeaway from that book?
I love that when he talks about it's not that life is short, it's just that we don't know how to live it. We're not doing enough. Um, what's interesting is, for me, at least from my perspective, whenever I'm not progressing, life actually feels longer, but it doesn't feel as happy. But when I'm
Mhm.
progressing, life feels shorter. Like, it feels literally like time passes by quicker, but at least I'm happy. And that's just been my
Mhm.
own perspective. It's like, if I'm stagnant because you're not doing anything, every day feels like a drag. Every day feels long. And you're like, fuck, man, when is this going to finish? Like, when is this over for me to just be in this stagnation? But when you're like going to conferences, you're traveling, you're just experiencing life with other people, your partner, you're going to concerts, you're doing shit, you're learning, you're improving, you're growing your business. It feels like time passes by quicker because your mind is occupied on a bunch of stuff, but you feel happy that time passed by fast. You're like, wow, in
Mhm.
that short time, I experienced all of this. This is
Mhm.
amazing. Like, I want more of this. If in that period I experienced that. So that's been my that's been kind of my experience when I'm in stagnation. And I want to change my answer again to what I think it means to be successful, because I think about progress, and I think progress is the most important thing, but what do you need in order to make progress? Well, in order to make progress, you need direction and discipline.
Mhm.
Like, you need that. You can't make progress without direction and discipline. And I think that's what success truly is: having direction and doing your duties, like you said, every day,
Mhm.
regardless of how you feel. And that's again when I feel the best. Like that always, even if it's not, if it doesn't feel good in the moment, it always makes me feel good. And I come back to I told you this, I'm pretty sure before, like I was doing cold plunges for a while.
Hmm.
I did like I think I did for 10 days, 10-day cold plunge challenge. And this was during the cold too. I used to go out into the backyard, fill up the tub with cold, freezing cold water. I hated doing that. I freaking hated it. It's not, that hasn't changed. I will still hate it no matter how long
Yeah,
it
of
takes.
course.
And I used to look at it and I used to pour the water in and I used to try to play mind tricks with myself in my underwear in the backyard. My neighbors are looking at me like literally like this guy's crazy. He must be a serial killer or something. And I would look at the water and go, this is not going to be as bad as it is. And then I would put my whole legs in and I'm like, yo, this is worse than I
This is
thought.
just as bad as you think, probably even
Like,
worse. Yeah.
this is worse than I thought it's going to be, but I still did
Yeah.
it. And then I'm like, this is cold. All right. I get out and I'm like, nope, you're not leaving until you get your body in. And then
Hmm.
I would go in a second time and I would get my whole bottom in. And I'm like, this is still cold. I can't do it because you're huffing and puffing, right? So I would get out and I'm like, I got to do it. I got to get the body in at least one dip. And I would go in a third time, get my whole body in. It's terrible. It's freezing. You come out after 10, 15, 20 seconds and your whole body is red. I would come inside. I'm wet. I got to like dry off and stuff. But the whole day after that, it was like that moment was the happiest I've ever felt. And I'm probably going to go
Hmm.
back to it again. I have to clean it out. But like you just feel unstoppable. You feel like you can
Hmm.
conquer anything. And that feeling to the masculine energy is perfect. Like that's what
Hmm.
success means to me. Just that feeling of
Yeah,
progress and discipline and direction. There's nothing that can beat it. There's just nothing that can beat it.
I agree. So success to you means discipline, direction, progress. Yeah, I
That's
definitely
it.
agree. Discipline is the center of my behaviors, how I think, how I just go about my day to day, and it's almost, you could say, one of the highest priorities that I keep at the forefront of my mind. Always, and I have it in writing. I have it pretty much everywhere I look. Things that really inspire me, but quotes around discipline. And I just think if you're a disciplined individual, almost nothing, I mean, short of, the laws of physics, almost nothing is impossible. And so much comes down to discipline. And so many people in the world lack discipline. So
Mm,
if you want the unfair advantage, all you have to do is cultivate discipline. Now, all you have to do sounds simple, and it is simple, but it's not easy, of course,
yeah.
right? So if you just want that competitive advantage, just cultivate discipline. That's why
Yeah.
it's so important to me.
Yeah. And you're right. The world is not disciplined. Like,
Mhm.
the quote, um, hard times create good times, or what is it? Sorry. Hard
Yeah,
times
so
create
hard times create
strong men.
strong
Yeah.
men create good times create soft men create hard times,
Yeah.
and the cycle continues.
I feel like we're in that stage where we have soft men and it's
Yeah,
starting to create hard times. Um, you have
I would
social.
agree. I mean, if you just compare us to our parents or grandparents, I mean, we're nowhere close. I think about my own parents and
Yeah,
grandparents and what they endured. Our lives are a joke compared to that in terms of struggle.
not even close, not even close. And I think as generations keep going on, like it gets softer and softer. Like when we were at the mall and we're like looking around, we're like, why are men, they literally look soft. They literally look soft. Like their bodies are just like super skinny, just weak. They're looking down at their phones like this. I think if you have discipline, you're gonna walk through people. You're gonna walk through the world. You're gonna be that empire builder off of the fact that alone sets you apart. I saw a video by Dana White, and he was talking about this too. He's like, if you're a savage, you can accomplish anything in today's world because nobody is
Yeah.
that. Nobody is that. Um, and I think a lot of people mistake discipline too. They think
Hmm.
discipline is like being perfectly disciplined, which is not true.
Mhm.
It's being disciplined is not being perfectly disciplined. I still mess up. I'm sure you still mess up. Even
100%. Yeah.
one of our friends and previous mentors, Brandon Carter, he'll put on
Mhm.
his morning IG story like, I woke up at this time. I woke up at this time. I woke up at this time. And there's times where he'll mess up and he'll say, "Ah, crap, I slept in."
Mhm.
But that's not the point of discipline. The point of discipline is that you have the intention of discipline on a daily basis. That is at the forefront of your mind. So even if you mess up, you go, how can I be disciplined in the next moment following that right after? And everything you do is from the intention of discipline, not from the perfection of discipline. Because I still
And I
mess
would just
up.
add to that really quickly
Yeah.
because I don't want people to take this the wrong way. When you're saying the intention, it's not just sitting there, doing the same thing over and over and over again and never making progress and telling yourself, well, I have the right intentions, right?
Yeah.
What you mean is the never quit, the grit aspect of it. You could
E-
fail today, you could fail tomorrow. You're going to continue to try again, and you're going to continue to try again. And whatever habits you're looking to form, that's what you mean by intention, right?
Intention followed by action.
Right.
Intention follows. So even if you mess up, you go, okay, what's the next thing I can do? What's the next best thing I could do to be a
Mm-hmm.
disciplined person right now? Okay,
Mm-hmm.
I woke up a little bit late. What's the next best thing I could do to be disciplined? It's at the forefront of your mind. And I think that's what true discipline is, because uh, you're going to mess up. You can't expect perfection. I don't think anybody in the world who says they're the most disciplined person on the planet, whatever they say, that everybody messes up. Everybody
Mm-hmm.
messes up. So that's not the point. The point is that you set it at the forefront of your mind. And every moment you do mess up, which is inevitable, you go, what's the next best thing?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the point is it's a real priority for you. And
Exactly.
even if you speak about it or not, if it's a real priority to you, that's all that matters, and you continue to pursue that. And I'm definitely with you. I think again, discipline is just the foundation of everything. And Dana White said that quote. I definitely agree with him too. That's coming from a certified savage, so I'll take his word for it. And it just makes sense. I saw this in sales when I was coming up in sales. I always looked at everybody else and I told myself, if I can outwork everybody, that was always the number one pillar, right? And that comes down to discipline too. If I can work longer hours, more days, more consistently, and just kind of outlast and outwork everybody, I can win at the end of the day. And that time allowed me to also skill up and become more talented, if you want to call it that, and work on everything else as well and get to know my product, get to know the industry, everything else. But the pillar was that discipline.
Mm.
It was trying to take every unfair advantage that I could in order to succeed, right? And by unfair advantage, I mean that in the best way possible, right? Always being ethical and doing the right things, but taking every advantage you can to succeed to the best of your abilities, to fulfill that potential that we all have, right? And I feel like same thing applies with all of your goals. If you can just kind of exercise more discipline in whatever direction that is, whether it's fitness, whether it's business, you can just, yeah, you can outlast and surpass everybody else. I read a quote recently, and I think you would love this. It was by, I think his name is Derek Sivers. And it was something along the lines of speed limits are for chumps. There
Mm.
are no speed limits in life. If you just don't follow the speed limits, you can accomplish so much more than anybody else expects. And I just loved the concept. I loved the idea. That just brings me to a question around time that I want to ask you. But I just love that idea. That quote resonated with my soul so deeply. By the way, the one quote that is probably my all-time favorite ever when I get asked this question goes back to Marcus Aurelius and Meditations. So I just thought about it. I want to share with you. He says, be strict with yourself and tolerant with others.
Mm.
That's it. Shortest, simplest quote that I've resonated with more than anything probably I've ever heard or read. And I feel like that just describes who I am, or at least who I strive to be in such a simple way. Be strict with yourself and tolerant with others. There's so much packed into both sides of that that I just freaking love. So anyways, this quote that I read recently, a couple days ago or last week or something, also really resonated about speed limits, because I've never believed in this, uh, to be completely frank, in any type of man-made structures or societal constructs, right? Whether it's school, whether it's whatever else, that's just meant to have you on par with everybody else. right? I heard when I was young, observe the masses, do the opposite, and that stuck with me. And I've always believed in that as well. I've always operated based on that philosophy. So for me, I'm not looking to work 8 hours if I know everybody else is working 8 hours, right? If I can work double that, I will, to pursue my goals, right? If I can accomplish more than that. Elon Musk famously said, if you work 100 hours a week and everybody else is working, 40 hours a week, you'll just win. It's that simple, right?
Yeah.
It's simple math. It's simple logic. So this quote around speed limits just resonated with me because everybody's operating by these manufactured speed limits, right? You got to sleep at this time. You got to get 8 hours of sleep. You got to wake up at this time. This is when the workday starts. Take weekends off. It's Christmas. It's New Year's. It's holidays. It's summer. Whatever. It's just speed limits. Who made this up? Who agreed to all this? What's the purpose? What's the reasoning? I mean, we can go so many layers deep here, but to me, it's another 24 hours to get after it and freaking win and do what you want to do. So, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it depends on who you are. Like, I don't think society could function if everybody was kind of free thinking.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
you need speed limits for the majority of people, and also for the majority
By
of
the way, we're
people,
not talking actual speed limits. We definitely would want that, in areas,
metaphorical.
but metaphorical speed limits. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you need metaphorical speed limits for most people, and honestly, they're probably happier for it. If you told the average guy right now that they have to work harder, longer hours to make more money or get to their goals, and they have to work out every day and all of this stuff, like the average guy is going to be like, I don't want to do all of that. I want to live a comfortable life, because it's in our human nature to want to be comfortable. It's only the select few that go, I don't want, this isn't enough for me. And maybe life would be happier and easier if you were just a normal human, right? Like
Yeah.
the average person. But for me, it's not. For me, I can't do it. Um,
Hmm.
like I talked about, the person who's just standing outside the bar having a cigarette, having a drink, and he's got a big smile on his face. Maybe that's easier. But for me, it's just not possible. And so I think it depends on who you are. If you're the guy outside the bar, sure, be that guy.
I'd love to find out who this guy is and go to him and just say, you left a big imprint on Mo. He's been thinking about you. Is this a real guy? Is this a metaphorical guy? I
No,
think we
no,
need some context.
this is a real guy. We were driving downtown, and I look at this guy, and he goes, "Hey," and he's like drunk and happy and like enjoying his life, and I'm like, "Huh, how simple it is." Like, he's probably so happy just the fact that he has a beer in his hand and a smoke in his hand. Like, that's all he needs to be happy. And that's cool, but that could never be me. My reality
Right.
is different. And so because my reality is different, I'm going to be different. And I think everybody has their limits. Like, I don't see myself working 18 hours a day. I That's too much for me. Whereas
Mhm.
somebody else, they don't see themselves working 10 hours a day. They're like, that's too little. So everybody has to know their limits. And as long as I think what's driving you towards direction and progress, a direction and discipline, that's all that matters. And that could look different for every single other person. But yeah, of course, you're gonna have to break the rules. You're gonna have to do things that's outside of the normal perspective if you want direction and discipline. But I
Yeah.
don't think
And
everybody can do that. I think most people would hate that. Most people do hate that. Most people want to be comfortable. Most people want safety. And if you told them that they have to be that kind of person, the world wouldn't exist. You need normal people. You need average.
yeah, and I definitely don't think everybody should do that or strive to, work crazy hours or whatever else. I'm a big believer that you need to pursue a fulfilling life on your own terms,
Yeah.
whatever that means. So, step one would be to sit down and actually clarify what your own terms are, what a fulfilling life for you looks like. That's why I even asked you that question, right? When you're clear on that and you realize what your values are and what really fulfills you, truly fulfills you, then you pursue that. It could be, yeah, just moving somewhere in the world where there's a huge work life balance and, where they siesta 4 hours a day and, enjoy their evenings together. There's different cultures and different ways of life, and none of them are right or wrong. It just depends on what resonates with you. But I think the problem is most people don't choose that consciously. They
Mm.
just go with the flow of society or whatever it is. But if you choose that consciously, you say, I want to move to the US or Canada or the UK or wherever there's, business going off, or I want to go to Dubai. I want to be in the hub of, some industry, and I want to work, 20 hours a day and barely sleep and accomplish a certain goal. That's good. If you say, I want to move to the Greek islands and just be by the beach every day and work, 4 hours a week and just sustain my life and make 100K a year and online and just be okay, then that's good too. It's whatever you truly find fulfilling. So, but my point was with the speed limits, I feel like in whatever direction, even in the direction of comfort, there are imposed speed limits by society. There are rules that are just agreed upon and we just blindly follow. And I think, like Elon Musk said, I heard it from him, but I don't know who originally said the quote: physics is law, everything else is mere suggestion,
Mm.
right? Physics is law. If you jump off a building, you're going to fall down as gravity. Everything else is a suggestion. I mean, we're all just on this planet trying to figure it out one day at a time, one step at a time. We're all building on each other's knowledge. This is why I love reading and philosophy and all this. We get to borrow 2,000 years of experience, and I get to read what Marcus Aurelius was thinking while he's running Rome. And I can use that experience and apply it in my life today.
His
Right. And
his own
hopefully,
personal diary.
yeah, exactly. And it's crazy. And hopefully people in the future can listen to us and read our works and whatever we do and apply that and gain some perspective to help them in their lives and in their paths. So yeah, it's all just really interesting. And I was thinking about traveling while you were talking and just different ways of life. And it's so important to gain that perspective. We already come from a different part of the world, but I think as entrepreneurs, as business owners, especially more than anybody else, it's important to have that perspective because it's not an easy path. Like you said, it's so much easier to go get a job, have a salary, have your work-life balance, quote unquote, and take your weekends off, take your summers off, whatever the situation is. It's not the easy path to become an entrepreneur, to take risks, risk of reputation, risk of capital, all these things. And I used to think everybody should be an entrepreneur. Everybody should try to live on their own terms and create something. And then once I ventured into entrepreneurship and into this realm for myself, and I gained experience and maturity over time, now I've realized it's what you referred to earlier. It almost has to be a non-option for you.
Mm.
I think for you and for me, it's never been an option to work for someone else and to be told what to do and to, live our entire lives by those constraints, right? We've always wanted some sort of freedom, autonomy. We've always wanted to exercise our creativity, always wanted to fulfill a higher purpose, whatever you want to call it. So nowadays, when I get asked a question of should I pursue this business, I have clients that ask me, I have a lot of young people, 18, 19, 20-year-olds that ask me questions like this. Should I go to college? Should I get into e-com? Should I do this? Should I do that? I always give them a frame of reference to think about this. I always say, if I told you, you can do this thing, but you have to do it for the next 3 years, 7 days a week, 12 hours a day. Would you still do it or not? The answer is, definitely not. I can never see myself doing it that consistently for that long, 7 days a week, 12 hours a day. No, I'm not interested anymore. Then there's somebody out there who's willing to do that, and they're just going to beat you. So it depends on how far you want to go with this path, right? That's a good way, I think, to think about and eliminate when you have multiple ideas and multiple paths you want to go. I think it's a good exercise to eliminate what you truly resonate with and what is truly priority for you that you want to pursue for the long term. But the other way that I look at it is this a must for you? Do you feel obligated to do this? Is it almost like you don't have an option but to do this?
Mm.
Because if it's just for the money or whatever else, chances are you're not going to have longevity in that thing. And I've always felt that even about sales. I always felt like I don't particularly enjoy sales. Even when I was in sales roles, even when I was crushing it, top of the boards, setting records in different industries. Nowadays, when I'm working with salespeople, sales teams, companies, I don't necessarily enjoy the act of sales or even the training of sales, but it's just, I felt like I always had this gift. It genuinely, without sounding just self-conceited, it genuinely always felt like a gift and almost something I can't ignore. I almost have to pursue it and address it on some level because it was just there. It was almost not optional for me not to pursue it. So that's just how I felt about that. But I'll let you say any comments you have on that. And then I want to go a huge circle to one of the quotes from the Bible that I sent you a while back, in case anybody's still waiting.
No, I agree with everything. And going back to why I believe success is direction and discipline, you just put everything down to a T. It's like I always felt called to do this. And so if I have the direction and that's what I feel called to do, and I have the daily discipline, that's all you need in order to be successful. And I going back to the Bible, you mentioned the Bible. There's a good verse. It talks about the walls. Here, let me search it up. Walls down Bible verse. Um, it basically talks about how if there's walls similar to the walls of a city being broken down and anyone can enter, uh, is the same thing as the person who's undisciplined and lacks focus. And so I think if you lack direction, if you lack daily discipline or the intention um, and focus to be disciplined at every single moment, you're not going to live a successful life. You're going to be unhappy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think relating to that verse, it's something else. But I remember when I had this phase, right, over the last year or so, where I dove into religion as a whole, and I wanted to look at it with an open frame of mind. I mean, if anybody's listening to this, how many times we've referred to religion, people probably think we're religious scholars. I mean, just for context, we were both pretty much hardcore atheists. Came from a religious background, went to hardcore atheism, then became more agnostic and open to searching and seeking and looking at all these ideas and all religions, and becoming a lot more just respectful, and also seeing the value and the wisdom in it. And I feel like it's a continuous journey to read. And I was going through the Bible and a lot of other books that were related to the Bible. I actually just recently received as a gift, I'll tell you about this more off air, but as a gift, I received a box of books from the Orthodox Church, and
Mm,
a lot of them are really interesting. One of them is about marriage. One of them is about to be a man. And after I read them, I'll send them over to you as well. Really interesting books. So I delved into that, and I plan on reading the Quran in full as well, with translation, of course. The Torah. I think there's just so much value there. And I remember one of the first nights where I started to read the Bible. Sometimes instead of reading in chronological order, and I do this with all books, I would just kind of like close my eyes and open a random page and just read it. And again, almost like, if there is a God or some spirituality, speak to me. I'm open to receiving whatever message it is. And I think I've learned this from Hafiz, right? I think his name is
yeah.
Hafiz, who's a famous Persian poet. And his books, his poetry books, are meant to be randomly opened, and that's supposed to be your poem, your
Mm,
fate, right? So people do that all the time. So I think that's where I learned that practice from. But anyways, I do it with all kinds of books. So I remember that one night opening the Bible, and the first line that my eyes went directly towards was, again, I'm paraphrasing here, something along the lines of, you want to travel the narrow gate, for the wide gate is widely traveled and leads to wide destruction. I
mm,
read that one sentence. I had to put it down and sit down. I actually had to, I was standing. I was just going to read a quick paragraph, close it, go to bed. I had to just keep the book open and sit down and just think about that. And it resonated with the narrow gate for me is discipline. It's self-discipline. And it's something that was so top of mind. It's been top of mind. It's always something I've pursued. And to open the book, and the first sentence that hits me is, take the narrow gate. And then I continued to read, and that whole chapter or verse was really interesting. Um, but yeah, there's just so many lessons. I forget where I was going with that, but there's so many lessons. But back to the quotes, I didn't find the exact quote that I sent you. In case anybody's still waiting for us to revisit this, I personally hate hearing something on like a podcast or like a show or whatever, and then they forget about it.
right.
And I'm just, as the listener, I'm just curious. I'm like, go back to that. What was the quote? But if anybody's as OCD as I am, I can't find the quote that I sent you about that. But one that is about a couple that I have here that I know I've sent to you that were really interesting. One of them is so these are books that I was reading around religion. So they're quotes by different saints, by different religious figures and whatnot that I found interesting. This one here says, not only in this present age, but also in the age to come, God will always have something more to teach man, and man will always have something more to learn from God.
Mm,
That was very interesting. You can replace God with nature, with the universe, whatever you want to call it. But this is the idea of lifelong learning, constant progress, constant growth. Um, Another one that is a little extreme, but it's very much along the lines of what I believe, and definitely right up my alley. Let me find it here. It's by Tito Coliander, I believe. And the quote is, if you remember this, I've definitely sent you this. The quote is, "To rest is to retreat."
Mm,
That's a good one.
that is
That's
facts.
an aggressive quote. That's one I feel like every man needs to have on their wall. To rest is to retreat. I just love that. I love that. You tell me your thoughts on that.
Bro,
I'm getting
that's
goosebumps just
exactly what
thinking
I'm
about it.
talking about. Like when you're just not doing much, it feels like life has stopped. It literally feels like you've retreated from life. Like you're not playing life anymore. Like the whole point of it is to just play and continue to do stuff and experience. And you're not making progress towards what you should do. Since we're going by quotes, there's one by become a quote podcast here.
Yeah.
There's one by
We talked about everything but business, and I have so many business questions for you, but that just might have to be part two. It's fine.
there's one by Leonardo da Vinci. Um,
Hmm.
and this is actually before he died, apparently. Okay, like this is all apparently, right? Um, but Leonardo da Vinci before he died, quote, and I read this recently, and I'm like, wow, this hits home in exactly, you know, where is this? Okay, there we go. If my computer pulls it up, this hits home exactly with like he says, despite being considered one of the most brilliant geniuses that has ever lived, Leonardo da Vinci's last words before dying were, "I have offended God and mankind because my work did not reach the quality it should have."
Wow. That's
That's
a good one.
that's crazy. Like
Talk about setting a personal standard.
he knew exactly. He knew there was more for him. There was more progress for him that he could play more, and he's like, I've literally offended God by not doing more, by being stagnant. And so I just think about that in my own life, other people's lives, is like, don't stop. You should always have direction and you should always have discipline to continue moving and continue stop the stagnation, because if there is a higher power out there, that's what it would want you to do. It wants you to play. Even new
Yeah.
age spiritualism, like they talk about how we're just like basically hands of the creator, hands of the universe, just branches of the universe. Um, if there's a higher power, it wants to experience more and it wants to see what it can achieve. So go out and do that. And that's why I think like thinking in that way of like having direction and discipline is the most important thing. That's where you can find true success and true fulfillment.
Yeah, so let's get more practical here and actually start to bring some, value to everybody who's watching or listening, whether they're entrepreneurs, business owners, whether just individuals looking to better themselves. Obviously, the theme here between both of us is we're very much focused on self-development and pursuing our potentials and becoming the best that we could be, which is why we're finding so much wisdom and knowledge and, old scripture and religion and all these different sources, because I think you're the same as me. We just seek inspiration in
Yeah.
all things. I don't care whether it's, I could be thinking about, randomly, wow, Tupac died at 25. That means everything he accomplished and the legacy he left was by the age of 25. That's insane, right? I should be embarrassed of myself for everything I haven't yet accomplished, being older than that, right? I could just think about something like that and get extremely inspired, or I could read a verse from the Bible, or I could have a conversation with a mentor or with a friend. All these different sources of inspiration, it's all around us. And I think both of us are constantly seeking that inspiration, which is the interesting point here. But all this talk of discipline is great, but for somebody who's not in a good place mentally, physically, business wise, who's struggling, who's procrastinating on their tasks, who has, the to do list keeps getting longer and longer, who knows they want to pursue certain projects, but maybe they don't have the courage to pursue it. How do you overcome that resistance, that procrastination? What would you say are the steps to get things rolling?
That's a good question, because I feel like literally moving your body is the
Mhm.
first step to coming out of what what I would consider victimhood, because you can't get out of that low place if you are physically depressed, like you're physically feeling bad. And if you try to figure out life from that place where you're like physically not moving much, not getting out much, and we've talked about this before too. You said, when you travel, it's like the best thing you can do because of course you have experiences, it's fun, but also it gets you out of your regular environment to think differently. Your
Hmm.
brain literally turns on differently. It has different thoughts, it has different emotions. So I think if you're in that place, you need to find a physical goal, a physical challenge that you want to accomplish. No matter how hard it may be in the moment of like, I don't really feel like doing anything, just do something. Go on a run every single day. Do a 30-day physical challenge to go on a run every single day, or lose some weight, or do some meal prepping. Like I think the gym, and you know, there's Andy Frisella, he talks about 75 hard challenge. I love that challenge. I've never personally done it. I don't have a intention to do it because I already work out pretty much every day, and I eat well and all this stuff. But I think for the average person, if they're feeling low and depressed, you need to give yourself a challenge. And oftentimes a physical challenge is going to be the easiest starting point because it doesn't take too much mental thought. You just go and do it. Um,
Hmm.
Once you're feeling better in your body, then you can start to think a little bit more clearly. It's hard to be depressed and feel like crap when you've just hit the gym and lifted weights and done boxing or ran for an hour. Like it's just really hard. And then from that place, you'll often have better thoughts. And then from that place, I would go into getting clarity of direction. Like, what are your values? What are your top 3, 5 values? What do you actually value in your life or want to value in your life? And then based off of those values, set some goals. And then based off of those goals, set some action steps you need to take in the next 30 days, in the next 14 days, in the next 7 days, and in the next 24 hours. And then go do those action steps in the next 24 hours. And that is usually the best place to start because I believe momentum builds off of momentum. And if you're building momentum, it's very hard to stop it. Our brains just work in a way where once you do that action in the 24 hours, you're like, fuck, what's next? I feel good because, like you said, you get a dopamine spike. And when we get that dopamine spike, we want more of a dopamine spike. So that's probably where I would start. Of course, this goes very deep, but if I can give simple advice, that's the easiest simple advice I can give. Like, set a physical challenge, go and do
Hmm.
it, and then come back with thoughts of clarity.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think just movement every day is so important. And yeah, a huge part of traveling and why I love it so much is getting out of your environment. I tell you all the time, I like to travel and take myself out of the environment. And that's when I do all my thinking, planning, because I have so much more clarity. As one of my mentors back in the day used to say, you can't see the full picture when you're in the frame. So you have to
Mm,
take yourself out of the frame to be able to look at the full picture. And I look at life, I look at business, all of these the same way. You really have to leave your current environment because I can't sit here in this studio, in this office that I'm in every single day and try to think differently, try to think outside the box, or try to see the bigger picture, or try to see how I feel because this environment has a feeling to it already. This environment I associate with certain tasks or certain activities or things. So, yeah, I definitely love getting out of the environment to do your thinking and planning. I would say for me, it's very similar to you, but because of how my brain works, I've learned this about myself over the years. I'm very organized, and I call myself OCD just verbally, just as a not as a negative label. I just know that I really value control. I'm pretty much a control freak by all means, and happily so. It's very much by design, and I almost pursue more of that because to me, control ties in very directly with discipline. And if I can control my life and I can control my day to day and control my environment and control my happiness levels and control my future and my outcomes, why not? I want to have full control. It's not a bad thing. It's been given a bad reputation. So for me, my brain operates in this way. I like to have control over everything. So initially, I have to sort of do a planning stage, and then I have to execute. I can't do it vice versa. right? So as much as speed is important and execution and the speed to execution is really important, especially in business, for me, I always have to have clarity on why I'm executing in the first place before I can execute on something, right? It's just a loop for me. So what I would do if I'm in a negative situation or a tough circumstance, business wise, personally, relationship wise, financially, whatever it might be, I would take myself out of my environment, even if it's just going to a coffee shop. Go sit down at a Starbucks, go to a coffee shop, local coffee shop, go to a park, just somewhere else. Take your laptop or a journal, and like you said, write down some of your values, write down what you want out of your life. And I would write down just a few, up to three, no more than three, 1 to 3 simple goals within the next 3 to 12 months. And I would look at that short time frame, 3 to 12 months. And then I would look at putting some constraints or some structure, or you could say some discipline in place on a day to day that ensures my priority, my value gets addressed each and every day. Right? This is something I've learned from the highest level individuals. I use this example all the time of John C. Maxwell. I've seen him speak a few different times. For anybody who doesn't know, he was a preacher, a pastor, and then became a prolific author and writer on leadership. He's published, I think, 80 something books on leadership. And they always ask him, how do you write so much or how do you publish so many books? And he says, it's very simple. I just write. And they're like, yeah, but seriously, how do you do it? And he says, okay, I'll tell you. It's very simple. Every single day, 7 days a week, 365, I do three things. I read, I write, and I file, filing his work and the right chapters and whatnot. He says every day, as long as I do those three things, that's all I need to do. That day is a win. I've accomplished my goal for that day. And he knows that's directly in line with his main priority, with his main values, with his main impact and contribution and purpose and everything else. Right. So it's boiled down to very simple day-to-day structure. Right. So I've always believed in that. And I personally operate really well off structure and routine. So I need to have that. So for me, get clarity on the values, get clarity on the short-term goals, and even some of the long-term goals if you want to look at it longer term. Then I would put together some daily structures and then you execute. And then there's nothing to it but to do it. It's as simple as that. How do you wake up at 4 a.m.? You wake up at 4 a.m. Right? How do you lose 10 pounds? You go lose 10 pounds. How do you eat cleaner? You eat cleaner. How do you stop eating junk food? You stop eating junk food. There's nothing to it but to do it. But that execution is not going to be that easy if you don't have clarity and if you haven't thought about all this and if you don't have a real reason as to why you want to execute on that thing. And as you know, we build self-confidence by keeping those promises we make to ourselves. So then it becomes a game of just keeping the promise you made to yourself. You told yourself you're going to wake up, go wake up. Confidence increased. Do it again tomorrow. Confidence increased. Do it again to a point where it becomes second nature. It's not even something you think about. There's so much discipline me and you both have in our lives and in our businesses that is now just normal routine. We don't even think about it. It doesn't require discipline, right? So that's the goal eventually, to get it to that level. And yeah, my goal is always to go in that direction and to become more and more disciplined so I can do more and more of what I want to do, so I can become more and more of who I want to become. And that is the ultimate for me. It's not what you're getting, it's who you're becoming. And the ultimate is just working towards who I want to become. Where when I look in the mirror or I think about how I am in this world, I'm genuinely proud of that. I'm genuinely happy with that. And I think it's all about that. It's all about who you're becoming. So that's my take on the actionable step by steps. I don't know if you're the same in this way. Are you the same in where you have to plan and think and strategize before you execute? Or are you one of the people who like just executes on everything? You can just get going on things.
No, I have to plan it, but I just think about myself. I think dependent on what stage you're in, you're going to have to do things differently. Like if you feel okay, I think you can go directly into planning. But if you feel like crap, you have to get yourself to stop feeling like crap before you can plan. Because if you're planning from a place of like depression, sadness, all of these things, like the plans are not going to be very good because it's not coming from a place of clarity. It's coming from a place of desperation. But yeah, if you feel okay, then like go directly into planning. I usually plan a few things and I do this every year, which is my values, my vision based off of those values. And then I set down my standards based off of that vision. If I have to if I want to get to this vision, what are the daily standards I have to live up to? And then once I understand the daily standards I live up to, what do I have to not do in order to live up to those daily standards? What are my boundaries with myself and others and environment, so on and so forth? And then from there, you can get clear on your intentions. You can get clear on your goals. VVSIB, values, vision, standards, boundaries, intentions. And then you can set 12-month intentions, 3-month quarterly intentions, and then monthly intentions. And then I chunk down the monthly into 14-day, 7-day, and 24 hours. So I know exactly what I'm getting done down to a T. So I work kind of backwards. But yeah, if I feel like crap, then there's no point of doing that, because it's not, you don't even feel inspired to do that. You feel down. So for the person who's feeling really down and depressed in life, they need to get themselves to feel good. And I think oftentimes doing that with your body is the first place to start. Whether that's through meditation, whether that's through just running, setting a goal to do a 7-day workout challenge, whatever that may be, to just get moving so you increase your literal energy, and then you can use that energy to get really clear on your life. But yeah,
Yeah.
usually I plan and I mix both of them. Every single year, what I do is I take my backpack and I take a journal and I go into the middle of the woods, and I call this the 24-hour fast plus walk of pain. So I do a 24-hour fast before it, just so I'm mentally clear. And then I do the walk of pain. The walk of pain is you go out with a journal and then you write down a maximum of 7 lies that you've been telling yourself the entire year. I write down the 7 lies and then I fill up my backpack with rocks, really heavy rocks that have to do in accordance with the 7 lies. And then I go on a 2-hour hike. And in that 2-hour hike, I break it down where the first like 30 minutes I'm walking around thinking how heavy these lies have been holding me back. What have they been doing to me the entire year? How have they been holding me back? What has it caused in my life? And then I take the bag off, I put it down, and I go, okay, this is what it's been doing. What do I need to do? And then I write that down and I walk again with the bags. And then the last walk, I'm going up a hill. There's a thing here called the 1,000 Stairs, and I literally walk up the stairs. And it's just a very intense moment because you realize how the lies that you've been telling yourself are so intense and holding you back. And then once you get rid of the rocks, it feels incredible. And then I come back, and then that's what I do. I write down my values, my visions, my standards, my boundaries, and my intentions. And usually that's a very clear moment. So I go through that pretty much every week. I call it my priming sheets so that I know what I need to fix. And that's usually how I do it. But I think for the average person, if they feel like crap, they have to get themselves out of that hole first, and then they can get clear. Otherwise, it's not going to be very helpful for them.
Yeah, I could definitely see that perspective too. I think at the end of the day, it's not about what works, it's about what works for you.
Yeah.
So the more you can get to know yourself, and I forget who said this, but the ultimate aim of philosophy is to know yourself. And the more you can get to know yourself and understand yourself and become self aware, the more you can just have an easier time in life because you know what works for you. So I think a lot of what I read and what I look at in biographies that I dig into, because I just love biographies and studying other people's paths and stories, the more I get to learn about myself. And the more I see something and it completely turns me off. And I see something else and I'm like, wow, that's interesting. And I get to learn what I like and what I don't like.
Yeah.
Right. And then I gravitate more and more towards that. And, it's, I think, the way to go to get to know yourself. You just have to really expose yourself to different sources, different information, because the best we can do is with the information that we have, right? If I knew everything Warren Buffett knows, I could make all the same business and investment decisions Warren Buffett makes.
Yeah.
Right. But I have no clue what he knows. And, my knowledge in the investment space is nowhere near his. So I can't have the same outcomes. Right. And I think it's really important to know what works for you. And in that pursuit, get to know yourself. But switching gears here as we start to wrap up, I don't want to take too much of your time either. We could probably talk for hours and hours, like we always do anyways. So we'll record more of these podcasts and we'll go back and forth on a lot of different topics. I had a bunch of questions here for you that I wanted to ask you. But yeah, I think I'm just going to just wrap it up more naturally. I feel like I don't want to go into questions where I don't genuinely feel the need to ask. Um, when it comes to just what's next for you, or how you look at the future and how you look at the next 12 months, 3 years, 5 years, 7 years, 10 years, anything interesting that you'd like to share? Maybe, advice you've been given by a mentor that you're currently acting on or executing on for the future. Maybe plans that you have or something that you see becoming priority in the future. Or maybe, just in general, when you look at the future, what do you think? How do you think? Anything that you think will be valuable to the audience?
I'm starting to learn there's just so many ways to make money. And that's making me realize that there's just so much opportunity out there. Like so much opportunity out there. Um and you have to act on it and you have to move fast. And I think that's going to be everybody's biggest advantage is speed of implementation, especially in a world where I feel like everybody's speed is just so slow. Like everyone's distracted, everyone's unfocused, everyone's social media addictions. And so if you have speed of implementation, you're going to win. And one thing that I'm starting to realize is like there's just so many opportunities out there. And usually what I would tell people to do is just like focus on one thing, but I believe that you can spread your focus a little bit more. But at the same time, and we talked about this too, uh, with my business, I was spreading my focus with like 10 different things. And now I'm honing in on like two things, three things. Um, but you also have a lot of hours in the day. So you can do more. You can network more. You can talk to more people. You can take on more opportunities. Whereas most people take that time to waste time and they watch Netflix and they watch TV and they're doing all this shit. And I'm like, they're, life is not short, but at the same time, it's not unlimited. And so take the opportunities, have speed of implementation, and do that. And that's what I'm looking most forward to is like, I'm just seeing more and more and more opportunities around me.
Yeah, I have to ask you a follow up question. I actually meant to ask you this earlier, and yeah, I even have this down. It's like the fourth point I wrote down, but I completely glossed over and I forgot. But you just reminded me. This is something that's been very top of mind for me always. My first mentor, Jim Rohn, who had a real impact on me, he used to say, stand guard at the door of your mind. So from when I lived at home, I was, 15, 16 years old. I heard that for the first time. And I thought to myself, wow, this is so powerful because in my current environment, I don't have full control. I live with family. There are other external factors. I don't have full control. So I really do need to stand guard at the door of my mind to observe what's going in and what's going out. And, I used to actually I used to literally visualize Roman guards at the door of my mind, like two Roman guards wearing the armor and the red and the helmets and spears. I used to actually visualize that as a practice for myself. And anytime I would hear advice that I thought was terrible advice or negativity or naysayers or anything from my environment, whether it's friends, family, whoever, I used to just picture the Roman guards. And it was almost like a defense mechanism. It helped just block that advice. And it was almost humorous as well. So it took off some of the gravity of the situation.
Mm.
It added some humor to it. That was my way of kind of dealing with bad advice or naysayers at the time when I was younger. So I continued that throughout life. You definitely know this about me. I cut off a lot of people. I'm very protective of my environment. And I've continued to go more and more in that direction because, again, I like to cultivate an environment for myself where I'm absolutely happy all the time. I have positive people around me. I have people who my values are aligned with. Because life is too short for me to sit down and argue day and night with somebody who has completely different values than I do. It's just not worth my time. I'm not on a crusade to change people. Right? It's a 24-hour
Mm.
job changing yourself. I'm not here to change anybody else. So I want to be surrounded by people I truly love who uplift me and I uplift them and whose values are aligned. So I'm very protective of my environment. But one thing that has happened more and more and more recently over the last few years because of world events, because of the entire world locking down, because of health effects, wars going on, natural disasters, all these different things, it drew my attention more and more and more towards media, towards news, towards podcasts discussing this, towards all this noise. I just call it all noise, right? And I found myself at some point getting almost sucked into it where I started consuming. And the reality is, you're either consuming or you're producing. There's no two ways about it. And no, you're not doing both. It's one or the other. You're either consuming or you're producing at all times with anything. So I found myself consuming, meaning that was time that I could have been producing. As Seneca says, life is not short, but we waste it in these actions, this luxury, whatever you want to call it. But if that time was well invested, meaning instead of me consuming the news, I was actually, writing something, I was creating something, life would be a lot more valuable and feel a lot more full. So when I went on this last trip, this was about 5 weeks or so. I was traveling again, got some distance from my current environment. A lot of the times, especially when I went to Africa for the first time, went to Morocco, I went to the Sahara Desert, very remote places where I didn't have internet, I didn't have any connection. And a lot of times, just consciously as well, my phone was away, it was in my bag, right? And I was just very present to day-to-day life. I was present to observing other people's way of life. I remember talking to the traditional Berber people in the south, in the Sahara area, and just getting their perspective on life. And it was so interesting. And I was so peaceful. I was so calm. And I thought to myself, the world is fine. The world hasn't ended yet. Nothing's happened. Nuclear war hasn't broken out. It's just, life goes on as usual. But when you're so consumed by the noise, your perception of reality changes,
Yeah.
right? It completely changes how you see the world, your outlook. So I just got so much value from being away and not having the access that I normally do to social media, that I told myself, I thought I was being protective of my environment. I thought so far I was standing guard at the door of my mind. I thought I was producing and not really consuming much, but I gave myself too much leeway. So I told myself, when I go back home, I'm going to completely stop consuming. And that means unfollowing celebrities and unfollowing, even figures that I like and I want to tune into their work. But for this purpose and for becoming more disciplined and more focused on myself and my own path, unfollowing everybody, except for obviously friends, family, clients, things of that nature. But stopping the consumption of information, of noise, stopping tuning into, whether it's podcasts, whether it's Netflix, whatever it might be. I already don't listen to music. I listen to podcasts and audiobooks if I have time in the gym or if I'm driving. So that was fine. But even that, narrowing that down and not consuming as much. Even if you feel like it's positive, it's an audiobook, it's a podcast, you're still consuming so much information that's altering the way you think. You're always involved in other people's thoughts, right? So I decided to become a lot more militant than I already was with my consumption and cutting out the noise. So to ask you the question, I want to know your thoughts on how to cut out the noise in today's noisy world, how you do that, what your thoughts are on that, on consuming versus producing. How does somebody just eliminate all this noise and gets dialed in today's world?
Yeah. Um, I have a personal rule, which is, and even with this rule, it's like, it's not perfect, but I have a personal rule that if I'm not going to ever talk to this person in real life, have the potential of talking to this person and not just once, but being able to be their friend over and over and over again, I'm usually not going to follow them. Like, and honestly, I went through my entire Instagram and I unfollowed everybody, including my friends. I was like, I just don't need social media, because at the end of the day, if I do see these people in real life over and over again, I also don't need them on social media, because then
Yeah, I remember you unfollowed me too, and we've been friends since day one. So then I just realized, okay, this is just a personal practice. So I didn't get offended.
yeah, it's a personal practice, because I'm like, there's no point. Like, there's genuinely no point. I had, like, I don't know, 500-600 people that I was following, and I was like, okay, well, probably out of this 600, 650, maybe more, 670, I don't ever see in my life. Like, I have met them at least once, or I've met them a couple of times, or they're mutual friends, but I don't actually talk to them. So I removed that entire list. And then I had only my friends and family on there. And then I'm like, well, wouldn't it be more special if I wasn't following up with them every single day on social media and seeing their life on social media, and the only times that I could spend time with them was in person? it makes that time that you spend with them way more special because you don't have direct access all the time. So if I'm following you on, let's say, social media, and I'm seeing you all of the time, when I get to you in person, it's like I've already seen you a bunch of times. It's not as special. But if I'm not seeing you all of the time and I get to meet you in person, it's like, wow, we took all this time away from each other. I'm finally seeing them. It's just more, it adds more urgency, more scarcity to the person, and it makes it more special in my opinion. So I just have a rule where I just don't follow the person. I have two accounts. One of them is like a theme page, and there's a bunch of people that I'm following on there, but I never go on that account. So again, it's just not available to me. And I've always been a huge fan of playing with the availability bias, and I've talked to you about this before because I just
Mhm.
know myself. If it's available to me, I'm pretty mentally weak. Like when it
Mhm.
comes to availability, if I have ice cream, if I have a tub of ice cream in the house, I'm eating that entire tub. Like, my partner always tells me like, well, why don't you just have a scoop? I'm like, no, it's either all in or it's
Yeah, you just
nothing.
get after it.
Like,
It's the same. It's the same for me. If there's ice cream in front of me, I'm gonna get after it. There's no halfway in. It's all or nothing.
yeah, it's like, why would I only have one scoop? Like, I'm gonna eat the entire thing and I'm gonna enjoy it, and then I don't have
Yeah.
to deal with it again. So
Yeah.
same thing with social media. Um, I don't follow anybody, and I've told you this as well. When I upload stuff on social media, I'll download it on my phone, I'll upload it, and then I'll immediately delete it again. And for some people, that may seem like too much. It's like, well, why don't you just not use it? Or you have to download it every time and delete it every time. It's like, but I know myself. If it's there, my brain is naturally going to slide. My brain is naturally going to hit out of habit, and I'm going to end up being stuck into the loop. And I don't want to be stuck into the loop because it's not a fun time. It's immediate dopamine, and these apps, they have departments of people, not just one person. They have departments of people going, how do we keep people's attention? Because when we keep people's attention, it makes us a lot of money, and that's where all our money is coming from, people's attention. So they have departments and departments and departments looking at data, looking at how they can fix the app, looking at how they can do the colors. You're not going to beat those people. You're not that mentally tough to be able to beat a department of 30 people who are looking at data of millions and making choices to make the app addictive to you. Why would I try to beat them? Why don't I just delete the app, get rid of the access, and then I don't have it in my reality anymore. I don't have it in my world. Um, so honestly, it's just not a big problem to me because I just don't have access to it. Like, imagine if your
Mhm.
phone broke, your laptop broke, life would be pretty simple. You don't have access to it. It's not part of you. You're not worrying about whether you're going to hop on social media and all this stuff. It's just not part of your reality. So I remove it from my reality. I remove it from availability. Um, and I have that personal rule. I'm not going to follow anybody unless I'm seeing them regularly. And then you realize it's pointless to follow them because you see them regularly.
Yeah, yeah. I saw that deductive reasoning as you were going through it. I was like, this is gonna lead to why just follow them because I text them and call them anyways if I care about them. So
Yeah,
that
you have
makes a lot of
direct
sense.
access.
Yeah, I've been on the verge of unfollowing everybody as well and just having that zero following count on all my social platforms many times as well because I think the number one thing is what it communicates to yourself. Forget what others think. Some people might think that's arrogant or you're trying to look cool or whatever it might be. And for some, that might be the case. That might be their reasoning. Obviously, you just explain your reasoning. And I think your reasoning is obviously the right way to go. And the real thing underlying that is what you communicate to yourself that I'm not here to consume. I'm not here to use this platform or be used by it. This is strictly for business. It's strictly for me putting my message out there and whatever you're using it for. So I think for entrepreneurs, for business owners, it's a powerful concept for sure. For me personally, I just narrowed it down to a rule. I follow friends, family, clients, people who I actually have interacted with, who I've met, who I know, and it just comes down to that. It's I don't follow anybody for the sake of consuming information, and I'm never on there anyways. Just like yourself, we both have our teams on these social platforms handling things, so that's good. That helps me just stay off it and again stay out of the consumption cycle. So again, long story short, it sounds to me like you also cut out the noise
I,
and are not tuned into everything else.
yeah, and like it's these apps still find a way. There's times where I get sucked in still. Like they'll find a way, and you're like, oh shit, I'm getting sucked in. But if you're not sucked in regularly, what happens is you have more conscious will, and you realize when it's happening. Because I'm not so tapped in and tuned in, when I go on TikTok, for example, and I'll like upload something and I start to notice myself scrolling, I'm like, what the hell? Like this is different than my normal. And so I'm able to
Mhm.
click off of it and get rid of it because I'm not so tuned in on a daily basis. Whereas the average person doesn't have that conscious thought because that's just part of their reality. It's their daily thing that they do. So because it's
Mhm.
not my daily thing, it becomes easier for me to get rid of it because I'm like, oh, what the heck is going on? This is different than what I'm used to. But yeah, it's just not part of my reality. I don't have to deal with it. I've honestly thought about just getting rid of my phone and getting an old phone, and the only way I can upload is through my laptop because it just makes things easier. Like I'm happier. I notice people around me are happier, and even when I unfollowed a bunch of people, the people who are closest to me asked me, "Did you unfollow me?" And then I give them the reason, and they're fine with it. The people who weren't that close to me either got pissed off or they unfollowed me. So then I don't have to deal with them anymore. Like it
Yeah,
just does the filtering. Like why would I have
it's a good way to
Instagram as
vet out your circle.
yeah, it's like why would I have Instagram be the connector? I could just connect to that person directly. Like there's no point. Um, so I just remove it, man, and it makes life more enjoyable. Like when I see you, I haven't seen your videos for 10 days, and then I see you. It's like I genuinely saw you after not seeing you for a
Mhm.
week, 2 weeks, a month, and it makes that moment way more special. It makes it more new,
Mhm.
rather than it being something that you're used to. So it's just too many benefits for me to not use it, and all downsides to regularly use it.
Yeah, for sure. I definitely agree with you. I think it makes a lot of sense. And I think, again, it's whatever works for you because we do it in our own ways. We each do that slightly differently, but the point is the end goal. We both have pretty much the same
Yeah.
ideas around that end goal. I'm going to wrap it up with this question here. And I think going into this podcast and, the next 1,000 episodes to come, as of now at least, I want to end it with this question because I think it's something that is near and dear to me. When I was younger and I was going to all these business conferences and seminars and just trying to learn from successful people, I was just trying to like pick into their brain as much as I could. I would always ask them, I was like, let's say 19 at the time, 20 at the time. I'd always say, if you could go back to yourself, knowing everything you know now, if you could go back to your 20-year-old self, whatever age I was, I would adjust the number. What advice, what's one piece of advice you'd give yourself? And then I'd hear all kinds of different pieces of advice, from don't do drugs to pursue this type of business to elaborate business models. I had people tell me all kinds of different things. And it was so interesting to hear that from individuals and whatnot. So I want to ask you the same, not any specific number, but knowing everything you know today, if you could go back to your younger self, what's one piece of advice you'd give yourself?
I mean, hindsight is 2020. Um, what piece of advice would I give myself? Because the thing is, I look up, and we talked about this in the beginning, and I guess this this comes full circle, right? Because it comes back to the same point. Um, I wouldn't change anything. Like everything led to the experiences and lessons I have now. And maybe if I gave myself some advice, it would, because the first thing that popped into my mind was like, track your finances. It's not sexy advice, but track your finances. I've lost a lot of money by not tracking my finances. Um, but at the same time, I also spent money like stupidly to the point where like I learned so many skills that it's going to be hard for me to not make money anymore. And so would that have been the best advice to tell myself to track my finances? Because then maybe I did and I didn't invest as heavily and I didn't learn the skills. And then I wouldn't be in the situation I am now. So I probably wouldn't change anything and I probably wouldn't give him any advice and I would let him live his life as he should and as life is supposed to play out. Um, And I'm sure my 50-year-old self is going to say the same thing. Like, life is supposed to play out the way it's supposed to play out. And your lessons, you're going to learn them as you're supposed to learn them. And that's the beauty of life. So, but the first thing that came to my mind was track your finances. Like, if we're to give practical advice to someone who can do it, yeah, track your finances on a daily basis.
Yeah, for anyone who's super practical or analytical, there's your answer. For everybody else, the deeper answer is you wouldn't change anything.
Yeah.
All right, I love it. Well, as we wrap up, where can everybody find you?
Just my name, search it up, Moe Abbassi, MoeAbbassi. And then, yeah, I'm pretty much everywhere. You can check out my content and whatnot.
And we already know he won't follow you back, so don't be offended. At Moe Abbassi, everywhere, all platforms. And thank you so much for your time, man. This was great. I'm looking forward to many more episodes with you. We'll dive a lot deeper into business, all kinds of different topics, but I definitely enjoyed it. And for our first guest on the podcast, I couldn't have asked anybody else. So thanks for being here.
Thanks, man. We got to do it in person. That's what's going to be
100%.
killer. In person, just having these deep convos, bro.
100%. I feel like we'll go so much deeper in person because it's just more real. We're having a real conversation. So we'll set that up. I think over the next couple of weeks, we'll find some time in both our schedules and set up some in-person ones for sure. But thanks for being on here, and everybody else, thanks for tuning in. See you on the next one.
Thanks, man.